Hello everybody and welcome to my run and gun Witchhunter build guide. Now I probably should have chosen a different boss fight to showcase in that footage there, but hey, what can I say? I'm not cherry picking the best case scenario for each and every single one of my encounters in this build. Anyway, as you saw from the gameplay, this is very much just a run around, shoot your crossbow, no strings attached, no gimmicks type of build. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I have the entire guide written up in the description below on Mobalytics, so go ahead and check the link if you're more into the written kind of thing. Other than that, let us dive into the build. So how this works is you have to have a very good weapon. This character right now probably costs around 30 divines, but don't worry, you don't need 30 divines to get the build up and going. You can definitely do it for like 2, maybe 3, but you're definitely gonna need a solid weapon. So a lot of fizz damage, obviously, because the fizz damage feeds into our skill, it gets converted into lightning. The lightning damage on top doesn't hurt, but most importantly, getting plus level of skills on top. Very, very, very important for your overall damage. Also, second to that, you're going to need some pretty good rings as you progress into the end game, especially, and you get, very tanky bosses that you're trying to kill. So in this case, added fizz and added lightning are both very good. You can see this breach ring over here has a whopping 4 to 106 lightning damage thanks to the lightning catalyst here. But thankfully for the rest of the gear, it is literally just evasion and energy shield, as high values as you can possibly get, while of course still capping your elemental resistances. I also have some rarity on this build. Currently, we are sitting at 78% rarity, so not the end of the world. If anyone's curious, by the way, I think the sweet spot for rarity is like 40 to 50%, because if you did not know, it is multiplicative. Your character's rarity is multiplicative with any modifiers on the maps that you're running. Therefore, around the 150% total rarity mark, which you can get a ton of rarity on your maps, like upwards of 200, 300% sometimes. So that's multiplying your character's rarity value. Anyway, all I'm trying to say is that if you have about 40-ish% on your character, it probably feels fine. But for every other piece of gear, it's just energy shield, resistances, have a little bit of damage here on the gloves. Don't forget you can get added fizz and added lightning as a prefix on your gloves. That does compete with your evasion energy shield mod, so be careful about that. And that's about it for the gear. If you want to see specifics, again, check the Mobalytics in the description below. For abilities, we are using galvanic shards. This is our primary skill, bread and butter, using this 99% of the time, I would say, especially once you get your build up and going. And then for single target, we press the Q button and we use shock burst rounds. Also for single target, we will press the R button, or whatever button you use. Obviously, we will cast Voltaic Mark, which makes enemies get shocked easier, and then cast Conductivity, Big Curse, which lowers their lightning resistance for even more damage. But that is the basic rotation. You just spam the galvanic shards right here, the shotgun one, and then once you find a tanky target and they get shocked from galvanic, you press the Q button and swap to shock burst until they die. So that being said, our support gems on galvanic are helping our clear speed and they're helping our chance to shock. So for clear speed, lightning exposure for single target, conduction for chance to shock, single target, and then lightning infusion just to make our chance to shock a little bit higher. If you did not know, the chance to shock something simply comes down to a weighting against your own lightning damage and then the target's elemental ailment threshold, which is basically just how much HP do they have and then how much extra elemental ailment threshold do they have. It's like a map mod you can get sometimes. So basically all I'm trying to say is the more lightning damage you have, the much easier it is to shock something. Then shock burst rounds, and the reason why we're using it is you can see right here, hitting an enemy affected by a lightning ailment does damaging pulses. Each one of these pulses deals 192% damage, and we shoot it this quickly. So every single one of those shots is dealing 192% damage versus a shocked target, which is why shocking something is so important. And then support gems here, area of effect, doesn't matter because you're just hitting one target, so the more area damage is basically free. The pulse does count as an AoE, by the way. If you hold the Alt key, you can go over here to the pulse. Clearly, this is where the AoE component comes into play. So 40% more damage here, 25% more damage here, 25% more damage here because we don't actually need to inflict ailments with shock burst. In fact, it can't. Pro tip, the payoff tag here at the top, if you see a skill gem with this, it cannot inflict an ailment that it interacts with. In this case, again, the pulse from the shock burst rounds happens when you shock something. Therefore, shock burst rounds itself cannot inflict shock. So Elemental Focus is a free support gem, 25% more damage. Heft, this is actually kind of interesting. I think this might be bugged. So the way this works right now, if we go over to Pulse, you can see my top end damage is 13,021. I take out Heft, and it is 11,150. So this isn't supposed to work because in PoE 2, how they handled conversion is this converts 100% of physical to lightning damage is supposed to happen, and then all of your increases and more multipliers will apply to the skill. So either it's a bug or this is just worded a little bit inconsistent in that the support gems are actually applying before the skill gem itself. So you think of Heft, the reason why it's actually working and applying to this pulse damage, again, it's like it's increasing this physical damage value that's being passed into shock burst rounds. It's not actually, going through the conversion process. It's just increasing this 104 to 422, 30% more maximum. So it's affecting just that 422 top end damage. That's the way I'm thinking about it, but it also just straight up might be bugged. I don't know. And then finally, for a 6th link, you could use something like Fresh Clip, which gives you a lot more damage based on bolts that you load. If you did not know also, Shock Burst rounds, unfortunately, is bugged in that the quality of 7 additional bolts loaded per clip straight up doesn't work. It literally has no impact. So as of right now, I am running martial tempo just for more attack speed, but once it gets fixed and you are loading additional bolts with quality, it's safe to say that Fresh Clip is going to be a much better support gem. Emergency Reload, this just gives us a little more damage. You get 30% more damage for the next magazine. I don't think this maximum buff duration really matters. Essentially, you just have 1 extra magazine with this extra damage bonus. Once you run out of ammo for that given magazine, you then lose the damage bonus. Doesn't matter how long this duration lasts. That's the way I think Emergency Reload works. So we're simply using Ingenuity for faster cooldown recovery, and then Premeditation for it to give us an extra 15% more multiplier. Voltaic Mark simply lets us shock an enemy more frequently, and it also increases the shock magnitude. You can see right here, shock has 15 plus 30, 45% increased effect, which is very, very, very powerful. On a single target, this will make a massive difference. Then for auras, we're actually running quite a few here. So the first one is Wind Dancer, gives you a more multiplier to your evasion rating, which is very good because we're stacking evasion and energy shield. So you can see with this, I have a 75% evade chance. If I turn it off, I simply have a 63%. So it makes quite a big difference. And Wind Dancer also has a pretty interesting mechanic that when an enemy hits you, you just deal a little bit of area damage called the Gale Force, and it knocks back, wait, it knocks back enemies? Wait, no way. I didn't even see that. So I had knockback support in here, but it turns out that Gale Force already knocks back enemies on hit, so I guess you learn something new every day, right? That was a useless support gem. So we have Precision here just for some more accuracy, Magnified Effect because the Gale Force AoE will be scaled by that, just knock back enemies in a larger area. And then Maim on hit slows their movement speed, so once they get knocked back, it's harder for them to get back in range. And Reduced Evasion rating is actually quite nice, lets you hit them more frequently with your accuracy rating. Herald of Thunder is absolutely essential to your clear speed. Every time you kill an enemy that is shocked, you get, I think, 5 bolts, something like that. And then you just giga buff your attack by 174% extra damage. And with this, we have Shock Siphon just to sustain our energy shield a little bit. Innervate, some people run Innervate on the primary attack. I think that's kind of a waste of a gem link because you can just slap it on your Herald of Thunder, and this will be up like 99% of the time while you're mapping. Anyway, Innervate gives you 35% damage as extra lightning damage, so essentially 35% more damage for us. Very nice. And then Lightning Penetration, just because why not? It's probably not even necessary, honestly. Grim Feast, this thing is a no-brainer if you are an energy shield character. All this does is essentially while you are mapping, you get double the amount of energy shield. So right now as a base, I have 1969. Nice. Energy shield, and then with Grim Feast active, this will go up to 3800. Just think about it like that. Very simple. But for bosses, specifically very tanky bosses, I didn't even do that in the clip that you saw at the beginning of the build here, you can enable Attrition, which goes up to 58% more damage. We already have Culling Strike for free, given our Ascendancy, which I'll cover in 1 second, so that doesn't matter. But 58% more damage to a target is quite a bit. And these two things literally do nothing while we are fighting a single target. Herald of Thunder only procs when you kill stuff. Grim Feast only procs when you kill stuff. And what are you doing when you're fighting a single target? Not killing stuff. And then last but not least, Conductivity. So the way I think this works, if you did not know, if you look at penetration here, it says that you can only penetrate a resistance down to 0. This is much different from Path of Exile 1, where you can continue to penetrate resistances into negative values. I think the cap is negative 200%. So in PoE 2, the resistance cap is simply 0. However, I think the way that reducing an enemy resist works is that this negative 33 to lightning res happens after penetration. So, for example, if an enemy has 30% lightning resistance and we're penetrating at least 30%, which we are in this build, you then have the resists at 0 for the purposes of your attacks, right? Well, then Conductivity comes in and lowers it by an additional 33%. I don't know for sure if this is how it works, because if it does work that way, this is essentially 33% more damage to an enemy. Otherwise, if an enemy has 30% lightning resistance and we lower it by 33%, we're essentially dealing, 3% more damage to that target if they're at -3. So, leave a comment below if you know exactly how penetration and lowering resistances go hand in hand in PoE 2, because I don't really know. And then for Conductivity, you're using Focus Curse, which makes the AoE pop right here a little bit faster. Heighten Curse to increase the lightning res that it lowers. Persistence for obviously more duration on the curse, have to cast it less. And then Life Tap because it costs quite a bit of mana otherwise. Finally, here, the passive tree, we are going the Witchhunter for our Ascendancy choice. The first node I took was Zealous Inquisition. This is actually a very nice node. 10% chance to basically, when you kill an enemy, have it explode in that big area. It's a big white circle with a cross in the middle for 100% of their maximum life. And on top of that, you get a 20% chance versus undead and demons. And Guess what type of monster breaches spawn, boys? That's right, demons. So this makes it so you just instantly wipe breaches. Very satisfying node. Next, we have sorcery ward, which is this little number in the corner here. Just think about sorcery ward as I have 4,127 extra health versus elemental damage only. But you do have the massive penalty of 50% less armor and evasion rating. Armor doesn't matter whatsoever, but we are stacking evasion. So this means you cannot go something like acrobatics, which a lot of evasion characters are doing, because if we took a 50% less multiplier with a 70% less multiplier, we would have like no evasion whatsoever, unfortunately. So I can't go acrobatics because of sorcery ward, but it is still a very, very, very powerful defensive node. And then finally, for the last ascendancy point, I chose Culling Strike because why the heck not? Finally, for the passive tree itself, it's actually quite simple. We're just going for like projectile based stuff, projectile damage, a little bit of attack speed, movement speed, accuracy rating, but namely a bunch of elemental damage and shock related things. So chance to shock here, attacks penetrate resistances here, damage penetrates lightning res, chance to shock. This node is so unbelievably busted. Lightning rod. Lightning damage with non-crits is lucky. Lucky keyword simply means that it re-rolls an odd in your favor. So for example, if we look back at our single target damage of shock burst rounds, click pulse, our damage range is a whopping 1,900 to 13,000. That is the damage range that it chooses a number from whenever we hit a target. Obviously, that's a very big range. So what lightning rod does is, let's say you roll like 3,000 damage on the low end for your hit, then it re-rolls and you get like 8,500. It's going to choose the 8,500 damage. And this happens for every single hit that you deal. If you are a lightning based build, you need to take lightning rod, period. Other than that, we have some blind on hit. Blind is actually a very powerful mechanic because it lowers the enemy's accuracy and evasion. Lower accuracy of an enemy means your evasion is more powerful. Lower evasion on the enemy means your accuracy is more powerful. I think blind is a very, 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 very powerful mechanic. If you're running an attack-based evasion build, it's a no-brainer to try and fit it in. Other than that, like I said, it's just a bunch of shock chance. Shock magnitude is actually a very powerful mechanic because shock itself, an enemy takes 1% more damage per percentage of shock on them. And as you saw from the footage, shocks on targets that I do not cast Voltaic Mark on, which remember, this increases your shock magnitude by a butt ton. I think I'm sitting at 53 or 54%, and then I cast Voltaic Mark and we jump up to like 74% shock. So enemies are taking 74% more damage. And that's basically just from grabbing the shock and ailment magnitude nodes on the tree alone. So there are other ways to play a build like this. A lot of people are running cast on shock and like Orb of Storms to deal their damage. I think that's a kind of cringe. I'm here to shoot my gun and kill stuff, right? And you can also do like a weapon swap with a bow to put down lightning rod to just easily shock stuff as well. But my goal with this build was just simply run in a circle and shoot a bunch of stuff with my guns, and that is what I have accomplished. So one last time, there's a written guide in the description below on Mobalytics. Go ahead and check that out. Otherwise, you can check out my stream at twitch.tv/WoolieGaming. And other than that, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.